Hello everyone! In today's episode, you'll see me and my grandparents over the course of 2 typical days in the Korean countryside, eating and enjoying the agricultural scenery. It's footage I originally decided to not share publicly as I felt my audience would find the Korean country life too slow-paced and uninteresting. But in hindsight, it's an experience that I greatly miss not only for my grandfather, but for the calmer and healthier pace of life, having lived in the hustle and bustle of Bangkok for the past 5 years. I also hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did, and stay tuned until the end to hear the deeper significance this experience played in my journey back to Korea. 할아버지 사랑해.
I am too.
Is on the same Netflix show as the J5 one. It's like I'm going crazy.
It's time, it's not about escaping.
My grandfather's the type of man that wants to be consulted on everything. But now he can't even be bothered to be asked what size of dish he wants. So this local restaurant that my grandparents like to frequent is located right next to a butcher, and it specializes in Korean beef. But my grandmother opts for the spicy seafood soup instead. I think we definitely made the right choice, and going with a local that knows the specialty of each restaurant is the key to enjoying delicious Korean food. This particular dish is spicy hot and also temperature hot, but Koreans would call it refreshing, which they say 시원해. After the meal, we drop by the Korean butcher that specializes in domestic Korean beef, which Koreans would regard as the best, and for that reason it's expensive, so we're getting refrigerated. After the meal, my grandfather decides to stretch his back against some stranger's car, but no one can say shit to him because in this part of town, he's the oldest, and that means he calls the shots. Grandpa is so funny. He put all these hearing aid batteries back in here with the stickers attached because he thought it would recharge it. Now we have to go buy new ones. It's great that my grandmother has a great sense of humor. Only in the countryside do we ever check the timetable. Let's take a taxi instead, because unlike Seoul, it doesn't come every 2 to 5 minutes. And that's why we decide to take the taxi, as my grandmother is unwilling to wait 30 minutes for the next bus. In the city, she heads straight to the original place that my grandfather got the hearing aid from. She doesn't shop around or do online shopping. She's just good old simple country folk. We decide to wait for the bus, and we're surrounded by old people, which really isn't surprising to Koreans. Because in the countryside, like most Asian countries, the younger people have already left for the city in search of more pay or a modern lifestyle. Only the older parents are left behind. This particular bus doesn't take us all the way to the apartment, but my grandmother doesn't mind the exercise. It gives her something to do each day and to stay fit. Once back at the apartment complex, I noticed children getting out of school, and I also watched a fascinating scene of people moving into a new apartment building using these lifts to get the larger furniture through the windows. My grandmother tells me this is the only way that people move into apartments. Curious about the place which my grandparents prefer to live in over the hustle and bustle of Seoul, I decide to go for a walk to capture scenes of life in the Korean countryside. Just a couple hundred meters outside of the apartment complexes, We find a little village full of single-family residences that are older and that truly brought out the charm of the Korean countryside for me. I'm only told by my grandmother how inconvenient it is to live in these older homes without the modern conveniences that are incorporated into the apartment homes in Korea. Even the streets were too narrow for the modern convenience of cars. However, what was lacking in uniform convenience was instead a splash of unique character throughout every corner of the neighborhood. There was a sense of calmness and a feeling of rejuvenation that I've never felt before as I walked through the quiet streets of this Korean countryside with my grandmother, smelling the fresh country air. I even fantasize about raising my own organic vegetables and learning how to cook delicious homemade Korean meals. But ultimately, that was just a fantasy. I think I'm probably too young for that, but maybe in my later years. Something I also really enjoyed were my encounters with these fiercely loyal guard dogs. But when I approached them, they turned into nothing but fluffy, white, cute, furry friends. We also stumble upon a cow farm, and I'm an avid beef eater, but after seeing how cute these little cows are, I couldn't get myself to eat beef for a while. I think they're even cuter than dogs. Me and my grandmother have a little more fun shooting her blowing these things in slow motion. I then follow her further down the road along this quiet little stream to where she says there are more farms. She showed me rice farms, green onion farms, and more rice farms. I could imagine if I lived in the Korean countryside, I would probably never go hungry. Strangely, even with all the farms, the only farmer we ran into was towards the end of our walk near the apartment complex. My grandmother knew her, but she said in this small neighborhood, everyone knows everybody. So just as I finished doing my walk, my grandpa wants to go to the place he's farming over here.
여기 우리 밭 있고 저것도 우리 밭 있고
It's just a small piece of land that my grandfather raises various fruits and vegetables. But there was a time when I was a child, I could clearly remember our grandparents had a bigger piece of land in front of the church where they would grow all sorts of fruits and vegetables. It may not be the most glamorous thing, but there's a part of me that has always wanted to learn how to farm because I feel there's nothing more satisfying and delicious than to taste the fruits of your own labor. This scene was actually shot in accident. I was actually trying to shoot me and my grandfather getting water out of this little stream. But in hindsight, this is an even more special moment for me because if I ever learn how to farm, I can at least say my grandfather taught me how to water plants. While walking back, my grandfather told me he used his status as the elder of this place to get the local representative to build this local play area as well as the farm that he was working on. I was saving 2 of these because someone said it was very good. And he's sharing it with me Oh, I feel so special right now. Honestly, a lot of this stuff isn't really worth a lot, but it is because it's coming from my grandfather's private stash that he doesn't share with anybody, including my grandmother. Hey guys, I really hope you enjoyed that episode. It's probably one of the most boring things I've ever done, but in hindsight, it's one of my most special memories that I have with my grandfather because this is the only footage I really have where I was spending a normal day with him in the countryside where he loved to be. This sort of brings me to think about all the comments that you've been recently leaving on my Why I Left Thailand video. And it was relatively to be expected. I saw a lot of you guys recommending either I go to America or that I go to Thailand. And it seems sort of like a black and white choice for a lot of you. And I completely get it because I've only shown you Thailand, where I clearly have my heart. And America seems like the sensible option. I think I only saw 2 people saying take your time in Korea. But to the people who say go where your heart is, I have to say my heart is also in Korea. Things aren't so black and white for me anymore. Actually, during that trip, that very same night, my grandfather wouldn't let me sleep. And he would constantly wake me up. And because he was sort of at the set of Alzheimer's, he kept forgetting that he woke me up and asked me already to stay with him, that he would get me an English teaching job there, that he would find me a wife there. My grandmother was also getting annoyed, and it was a really ridiculous request. In all honesty, even in hindsight, I don't know. I don't think I could have stayed there for more than a year. But I do regret not having spent more time with him. I know a lot of you guys are saying I have to move on from my past. And to me, I actually am. Something that you don't know about me that's different than a lot of people. But maybe some of you can, because I also have a lot of immigrant viewers, Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans. But the difference between me and somebody that's grown up in one place all their life is that I never really had an opportunity to be with my family. When I was 7, I left to Africa. When I was 14, I moved to America. And I've been there pretty much all my life. And I decided to come out to Asia, but most of that time was spent in Seoul. I got to barely spend any time with my grandparents because I always thought I would be able to spend more time with them when I'm ready, when the timing is right. And even now, I still think the perfect time for me to maybe go to the countryside and learn how to farm and be organic and live a healthy life is when I'm older. But the fact of the matter is, especially family that are older, they're not going to be around to wait for your perfect timing. Me and my grandfather we have a very special relationship because he raised me as a kid. So it's not your typical grandfather-grandson relationship. He's more of my father in some sense. But due to circumstances, when I was 7, I had to leave him And I clearly remember how much of a heartbreak that was. It's something that I had to bury away, like far away, because thinking about that moment makes me very sad. And I guess that's sort of what made me into who I am, and has the effect of that third culture kid dynamic where I probably legitimately have clinical attachment problems because I've always constantly been uprooted from wherever I was. So by the time I ended up in America, I've been very careful about being attached to something because I was afraid I would lose it. And I think that played somewhat into the fact that I didn't visit my grandfather more often than I should have. Over the 30 plus years since I left him, I could probably say there was definitely less than 2 weeks of me spending time with him all together in that 30 years with somebody who literally raised me. So I hope that makes sense to some of you who are maybe jumping to conclusions about my situation and thinking I'm exaggerating the guilt I feel for that. It was a harsh reality check, the passing of my grandfather. So if you ask me where my heart is, it's in Thailand, but it's also in Korea. Because this is the country of my grandfather. And I'm afraid of discounting every other relationship I also have here to only find out only after they're gone that I regret not having spent time with them. So the choice I made to come here isn't just because of the past or regret, because if you watch that video, I think you can empathize with me. Why, as a young 30-year-old, I would want to, stay in Thailand and not stuck in some farm country. But knowing what I know now, and with my past, having not ever really having a family since I left Korea when I was 7, even my mom and dad being here, why I want to know and experience and feel family before it's too late. For those of you who have the fortune and privilege of being able to take that for granted because you've always had your family around you growing up. You always got to go to Thanksgiving dinner with them, have your 4th of July barbecue. I am truly happy for you. And I think that is a great gift that you have, and something that will allow you to be able to travel and do things and not feel much guilt later on. But for those of you with the special cases, special circumstances like me, that never got to have that opportunity growing up, And you are afraid of even pursuing that because you've locked the pain of separation deep down inside you, because you don't want to feel hurt. I encourage you to open that and be able to feel family before it's too late. I think the greatest gift that my grandfather has given me is giving me that realization. And that's a reason why I'm in Korea right now. So that I can experience family that I never got to, that other people, can take for granted because they were given. So I really hope you understand the particular situation that I'm in. And allow me this time. I'm not saying I'm going to be here in Korea forever, but allow me this time to be able to feel that. Because as great as Thailand is, if I only lived there and never get to experience family, it's something I know I will regret for the rest of my life. Whatever the case, I hope you enjoy my next episode, and I'll try to be more positive next time. And thank you for this opportunity for me to be able to make this video and talk about my past and share it with you guys, because it's a somewhat of a selfish way for me to heal myself, I guess. And I really appreciate all the attention and support that I've been receiving from each and every one of you. Thank you so much.
아이고, 덕분에 가서 좀 나라가 그렇게 사용하지. 외국에서도 다 깜보고 그냥 대통령이 없고.
이상으로 네, 지금까지 문재인 대통령의 취임 선서를 들어보셨습니다.
On the second day, we wake up and have breakfast. All the side dishes are the same, but it's made special by that grilled fish.
한참 먹어. 그래. 미역줄기도 사다 놓은 것도 그냥 있지. 다 먹.
We then share one little Korean melon, which is made even more delicious simply by the fact that we are sharing it. I then accompany my grandfather out to his little farm area and do the same thing, water the plants, but it's still special because we did it together.